of returning Great Britain to greatness.
Our new chairman, Zia Youssef, is professionalising the party at a speed never seen before in British politics. He's been charged with making this party an election-winning force. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our chairman, Zia Youssef.
We will turn this ship around. We will save this country. We will return Britain to being the poised and powerful country we know it can be. And we will leave a Britain for our children of which we can be proud. Thank you very much, Reform UK.
Hello, Reform UK. Well, firstly, I would just like to say what an honour it is to stand here before so many fake Reform UK members. There must be 1,000 of you here. And according to the Leader of the Opposition, you're simply a figment of Nigel's vivid imagination. Welcome to all of you to the Reform South East of England conference. And what a time it is for us to get together. Because we're on a roll, aren't we? What a remarkable year it's been. A year ago, Nigel Farage was enjoying his retirement. Reform are polling at 8% and climbing fast under Richard's brilliant leadership. Mr. Sunak was still helplessly watching boat after boat penetrate our borders illegally. A year on, Reform is the talk not just of the United Kingdom, but of the Western world. We've captured the hearts and imaginations of millions to whom we offer hope. We've opened over 400 branches across the country. We've risen to 24% on the average of the polls. And ladies and gentlemen, Nigel Farage is now the bookmakers' favourite to be the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Now, almost 50,000 people, 46,000 to be precise, joined Reform in the last 2 weeks of December alone. Just think about that. That's the equivalent of a third of the entire membership of the Tory party, a party which has been around for 190 years, joining Reform in just 2 weeks. A turquoise tidal wave is sweeping the United Kingdom, and it is giving hope to millions across the country. But I'll tell you who didn't have a great festive period. Someone who didn't exactly cover themselves in glory. And that's the Leader of the Opposition. Inexplicably, she made the unwise decision to accuse Reform of faking our membership numbers. You know, she keeps calling herself an engineer. And perhaps she is, in the same way that Rachel Reeves is an economist. Or Keir Starmer, of course, as we all know, is the son of a toolmaker. Well, she's not a very good one. Because she claimed that the ticker was fake, and that she knew this because, and I quote, she had been monitoring the back end. Well, I'm afraid, as has been now widely reported by a number of highly reputable journalists, you know, the FT, the Spectator, Sky News. That actually wasn't a joke, but yeah. The only back-end Kemi had been monitoring is the one that she was talking out of. But, you know, we should actually be extremely grateful to the Leader of His Majesty's most loyal opposition, because in the preceding 24 hours of that ill-advised, intemperate outburst, Reform UK signed up more new members than in any 24-hour period in our history. So please, let's give Kemi a big round of applause from all of us at Reform. But on a serious note, we're gathered here because we know in our hearts that the country we love, that we dearly love, is in grave danger. We live in a country in which somehow, despite spending £54 billion on defence each year, the number of military-age males that have entered the United Kingdom illegally via small boats now exceeds the total available soldiers to the British Army. Most are from Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. The Tories, and now Labour, have voluntarily inflicted a national security emergency on the United Kingdom. But change is coming. I want you to take a moment to picture the day in just a few years' time when Nigel Farage triumphantly arrives at number 10 Downing Street. He walks into the office, he puts his briefcase down on the desk for the first time, and he takes a seat. He picks up the phone to the First Sea Lord, and he issues an order. He orders His Majesty's Royal Navy to see to it that not a single unauthorized vessel crossing the English Channel makes it to the shores of the United Kingdom. Now, I'm well aware that the procedure is you go via the Minister of Defence. But I think Nigel should make that call himself, don't you? So our Royal Navy will embark on a humanitarian mission to pick up those attempting this dangerous journey, ensuring nobody is harmed, and they will be taken back to France for their own safety. We will leave the ECHR and replace it with a British Bill of Rights. We will pass legislation making it compulsory that anybody who comes here illegally not only will never be given the right to remain, but they will be deported back to the country from which they came. This is the most tolerant country in the world. But tolerance does have limits. And if your first act upon coming to this country is to break British laws, instead of being given free accommodation and phones, you'll be removed promptly and efficiently. And let me tell you, no unaccountable foreign court will stop us, because we will finally have a Prime Minister who will ensure that the interests of the British people come first. And a reform government will also do something that Labour refused to do and that the Tories have failed to do in their 14 years in government. We'll ensure that a full national independent inquiry is held into the despicable crimes of the rape gangs that have terrorized young girls in this country for decades. It will leave no stone unturned to ensure that justice is done for the victims and their families. It will ensure that the demonic perpetrators and the officials who enabled them by turning a blind eye are brought to justice and made to pay a heavy price for their crimes. We will do the things that are necessary to heal this country, because reform are the only ones who can. Now, I've made a few jokes at their expense today, but it's no surprise that the likes of the Tories and Labour and the left-wing media look at reform's progress and think it must be fake. Because all of their prior experience means that the level of cognitive dissonance fries their brains. All they have ever known is incompetence, defeatism, division, cynicism, self-serving corruption, resignation to managed decline. So when they're confronted with people like you, ladies and gentlemen, a reform party that is highly competent, patriotic, fast-moving and growing at explosive rates, they quite literally cannot believe their eyes. Well, I have a message for them. If you think reform's membership growth is explosive, wait until you see what a reform government will do to the British economy and real wages for the British people. It is going to be something to behold. Now, speaking of something to behold, is anyone incredibly impressed by how the Tories saunter around the House of Commons, condemning the state of the country? They genuinely seem to have memory hold the fact that they're condemning their own record in government. The Tories spent 14 years as arsonists, and now they want to pose as firefighters. Well, I have some news for them too. Reform will ensure that you never again get a chance to set ablaze the country that we love. Now, we mustn't forget that one of the most powerful drivers behind reforms and momentum is just how united all of us are behind Nigel. You know, the Tories have had 5 leaders in 6 years, 6 leaders in 8 years. It's no surprise that they're so weak and transient, because they have to spend most of their energy, most of their cognitive capacity, watching their own backs. Meanwhile, here at Reform, and I can tell you this as chairman, Nigel and the rest of our MPs and our team, we can focus all of our energies building a movement to make the United Kingdom a poised, prosperous and powerful country once again. Because British people should be among the most prosperous in the world. Instead, we languish 26th in the world in terms of GDP per person. Even though we have so much going for us, 4 of the top 10 universities in the world are right here on these precious isles. A large number, a big percentage of the world's finest engineers are here. And if anyone's in doubt about that, just go and look at the offices of DeepMind, or go and look around the Dyson Institute, or the factory making Rolls-Royce aerospace engines and nuclear modular reactors. We have a leading position in the world in financial services, and we have the best possible time zone. And as someone who built a successful business here in the UK, I can tell you, British people are full of talent, energy, and dynamism. The brightest and best, actually, despite the best efforts of our political leaders, are still falling over themselves to come here. Yet we actually make it impossible for them. Sadly, it's easier, and this is true, for a convicted murderer to get into the United Kingdom than it is for a Nobel laureate. So why is it that the British people get poorer every year in real terms? Well, it's down to the appalling, incompetent, Britain-hating political leadership this country has had to endure for decades. There's the religious cult of net zero, an appalling theft of hard-working British people's jobs and money to fund the growth of China and India and the egos of champagne socialists. Speaking of which, I have a quick question for Boris Johnson and Ed Miliband. If renewables are so cheap, why have British people been forced to subsidise renewables to the tune of over £90 billion over the last decade? That's £300 per household per year that they've had to pay in their energy bills out of their post-tax pay while they struggle to make ends meet, all to enrich renewable corporate shareholders. And given all they did was offshore the emissions to China and India, they've done nothing to make our world any cleaner. Make no mistake, this is one of the greatest heists on the British people of all time, and reform will bring it to an end. Now, you may have read the news and seen that Rachel Reeves, our Chancellor, is currently in China as the cost of borrowing for this country, and very soon, people's mortgage rates as a result skyrockets. After that horrific budget, it's no surprise that she's fled to the warm embrace of the Chinese Communist Party. Apparently, she's keen for ideas to grow. Well, Miss Reeves, let me tell you, while the Tories and Labour obsess about the religion of net zero, the Chinese announced this week that they will produce 4.8 billion tons of coal this year. You know, they can barely produce enough coal to power the plants that manufacture all the wind turbines and solar panels that your mad Ed Miliband is buying from them. They must be laughing so hard at us. And then there's the bureaucratic state. which has ballooned to an insane size. 500,000 people are now employed in the civil service, many of whom are working from home, and all being paid on your dime. In the last 7 years, their burden on the taxpayers rocketed by 50% to over £15 billion. Now, in the age of AI with competent leadership, there's no reason that couldn't be cut in half and still deliver a vastly superior service to the British people. But the problem of the bureaucratic state is much more pernicious than that. They act as a suffocating parasite, feasting on the dynamism and hard work of the British people. We have far too many regulations, far too many regulators, and nowhere near enough builders. That's why we will demolish the unelected, unaccountable quangos and unleash the tidal wave of potential in the British people. Now, the reality is the two old parties have spent decades creating these problems. Labour, Conservative, whoever you voted for, in the end it made no difference. You got the same result. And that's why reform is necessary. That's why reform has broken through with such breathless pace. Because in reform, British people see a real alternative. They see history being made in real time. Because the stranglehold that the two old parties have had on the politics of this country for a century now is finally being broken. And you, ladies and gentlemen, are responsible for that. And generations to come will owe you a debt of gratitude. You know, Nigel gave his New Year's message from Blenheim Palace, famous, of course, for being the birthplace of Winston Churchill. Now, this is a man whose legacy has come under assault in recent years. People calling themselves teachers have sought to rewrite history and disparage the legacy of one of the greatest Britons ever to have lived. But their efforts are in vain, because in the end, he lives on. He lives on in the people in this room. Those watching at home, the millions of reform supporters across this country who know in their hearts that the time has come for them to stand up and be counted in their country's hour of need. Because we see a future in which the United Kingdom, instead of being ritually humiliated, celebrates triumph after triumph, one in which national pride radiates through the kingdom because our people achieve astonishing feats in architecture and engineering and literature and medicine and sport and all aspects of human achievement, one in which families are bonded together and communities thrive, one of which young people feel fortunate to be a part. That is what reform will deliver. And this is why people are joining us in such droves. You know, we're almost at the 6-month anniversary from when Nigel asked me to be chairman of the party. And we've achieved quite a lot together. Our membership has grown by about 160%. I haven't checked that. You can probably see what the latest numbers are. But from 68,000 to 179,000. We've gone from no branches in the country to over 400 branches across the country. We've gone from 14% of the vote share in the general election of July last year to 24% in the average of the polls. In fact, the latest poll yesterday has Reform UK leading a national opinion poll for the first time. And let me tell you this, in case anyone thinks we're in the mood to slow down. No, we're not. We are just getting started. It's a truism in life that momentum and trajectory are much more important than absolute position. It's true in business, and it's certainly true in politics. And thanks to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, reform has all of the momentum in British politics. But make no mistake, we still have a huge amount to do. And that's why we need your help. We need people like you to step up. We need your courage, ladies and gentlemen. We need your imagination, and we need your energy. We need you to stand for us as candidates. In fact, you will have seen we have members of our team here and our councillors, growing in number almost every week, whom you can discuss becoming a candidate. We also need you to volunteer, to knock on doors and to campaign for reform. Will you do that for us? If we work hard, the sky's the limit as to what we can achieve together. We will elect Nigel Farage as our Prime Minister. We will turn this country around and restore the United Kingdom to its rightful position as one of the greatest countries in the world. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, once more, please put your hands together for Reform UK Party Chairman, Zia Youssef. I'm very proud to be here with you this evening. Look around you. Just like Leicester and Chelmsford last week, and like Chester will be tomorrow, at each of these regional conferences, there are so many more of us here today than were at our first national conference back in 2021. And that is a real sign of the progress we are making as a party in just 4 short years. But every journey has a starting point. It's particularly good to be here in the South East, where back in 1999, which feels like a lifetime ago, a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed young chap called Nigel was first elected to the European Parliament. And Nigel's journey since then has been stratospheric. And all of us here can now play a part in the next stage of that journey, a journey that ends in Downing Street. Our membership is surging. By the end of tonight, it will have topped 180,000 and counting. Only yesterday, we hit joint first place in a national opinion poll for the first time. And we were on course to gain hundreds of council seats in the local elections in May. And I say were because, as you probably know, many of the councils scheduled to face their public this year are now looking for an excuse to hide. Here in the South East, East Sussex, Hampshire, Kent, Oxfordshire, Surrey, West Sussex, they've all asked the government to delay their elections. There was a temporary glimmer of hope on the Isle of Wight, where the full council voted against, but the council cabinet pressed ahead anyway, accusing their critics of spreading misinformation. We've heard that one before. Now, I know there are potentially significant changes, structural changes afoot in local government, but my message to the other parties, both here in the South East and in every county that's considering these cancellations, use these elections to gain a mandate for the change you want to deliver. If you want more powers, first let your residents judge your record on the ones you already have. Devolution should be done with public support, not done behind the public's back. So my appeal to the council leaders across the region, please do the right thing. Proceed with these elections as planned and let the people decide. But of course, we all know the real reason so many counties are considering cancelling their elections. It's got nothing to do with structural reorganisation and everything to do with stopping Reform UK getting a significant foothold in local government. It's so obvious, it's nakedly political, and it's just plain wrong. But it's why we must never take our foot off the gas. By any measure, 2024 was a year of triumph for Reform UK. At the general election, with our 4.1 million votes, 5 MPs, we smashed UKIP's 2015 achievements. How many of you spent Boxing Day watching the membership counter tick steadily ever upwards until we surged past the Conservatives? I know I did. And in council by-elections, we're gaining support every week in all parts of the country. And even under first past the post, a system we know conspires to prevent insurgent parties breaking through, we are gaining seats with increasing frequency. And according to my calculations, our average poll score in December was around 22%. That compares to just 8.8% the same time a year earlier. But for us in London, it started a bit earlier in the year when I managed to win a seat as Reform UK's first ever elected member of a devolved body. And so I now sit as one of 25 members on the London Assembly. Collectively, we are tasked with holding London's Mayor Sadiq Khan to account. And my goodness, there is a lot to hold him to account for. After 8.5 years of Sadiq, London is less safe. It is more congested, and it is harder than ever to get on the property ladder. On crime and policing in particular, Khan has failed. 15,000 knife incidents recorded last year, 52,000 mobile phone thefts. That's 1,000 every week. And in response to an FOI request submitted by my team, the Met Police confirmed that just 2% of burglaries in outer London result in a summons or charge. On our roads, Khan has engaged in a prolonged war on London's drivers through the spread of low-traffic neighbourhoods, the unjustified expansion of the ULEZ tax, and coming soon, he's going to charge you up to £8 a day to use the Blackwall Tunnel, despite me submitting the largest ever petition to the Assembly in its 25-year history. And over the last 15 months, London's Jewish community has faced a persistent campaign of fear and intimidation on our streets. And yet on the Assembly, I found very little support from the other groups in calling out these protests for what they really are. They are hate marches, they are calling for jihad and intifada, and we all know where that ends. And all the while, the cost of government in London goes up and up. A 71% increase in the mayor's share of the council tax since he was first elected in 2016. I think most people would regard that a record of failure. But Keir Starmer thinks it needs rewarding with a knighthood. To a limited extent, the Assembly can also set its own agenda through motions, questions, investigations, and so on. And it's here that, as a single member, I feel most alone. When the Labour group proposed a motion to give free travel to illegal immigrants, with the cost to be picked up, as always, by us, the taxpayer, I was the only member to speak and vote against. What did the Tories do? They abstained. They simply sat on their hands. More recently, the Greens, of course, backed up by Labour and the Lib Dems, proposed a day of remembrance for victims of the global climate crisis. So you can imagine the horror on their faces when instead I suggested we should protect the victims of their net zero religion, the thousands of high-skilled workers being sacked as industrial jobs move overseas, the pensioners and families shivering at home this winter as renewable levies push energy prices ever upwards, and of course, all of us in this room who will have to pay the multi-billion-pound cost of decarbonisation through higher and higher taxes. We all knew this Labour government would be awful. We perhaps didn't quite realise how awful it would be and how quickly the wheels would come off. But that gives us a huge opportunity to capitalise on Labour's collapse while people's minds are still all too aware that despite their rhetoric, returning the Conservatives to government is not the answer. As Zia said earlier, politics is so much about momentum. And if the polling, the by-elections and the membership surge tell us anything, it's that we have momentum in spades. But for us to form a government in 2029, something this country so badly needs, we as a party need to keep demonstrating that momentum, building on last year's successes at every opportunity. To win 4 million votes in July was a fantastic achievement, but it happened largely on the back of Richard's sterling work building the party's national infrastructure from scratch, followed by Nigel's insurgent explosion onto the media landscape. In military language, this was an air war, and no party conducted a better air war than Reform UK. But the single most important message from our national conference in September was that if we are to form a government in 4.5 years' time, we need to match the excellence of our air war with an equally impressive ground campaign. Everyone in this hall knows that the Liberal Democrats achieved 72 MPs on the back of a vote share that was smaller than Reform's. So to guide us in our ambition, as we seek to learn from what the Lib Dems do so well, I'd like to quote from a book that you won't see on Ed Miliband's bookcase anytime soon. In 1980, John Masters wrote a book called The Hunters, Searching for Oil and Gas in Western Canada. So why would I mention a book about oil and gas? Is it out of some dewy-eyed love for fossil fuels? Well, not exactly, although I'm proud to be part of the only mainstream party that backs real energy security for our country. Now, Master's book was written in an era before the net zero lunacy that has led to the deindustrialization of our country. And I mention the book because of this quote. This is so simple, but it's amazing how few oil people really understand that you only find oil if you drill wells. You may think you're finding it when you're drawing maps and studying logs, but you have to drill. Masters wrote this because drilling for oil is hard, often resulting in failure, and it can sometimes feel futile. That's why it's all too easy to bury yourself in the displacement activity of poring over maps and logs when you need to be out there, persisting with drilling. So the same is true of political campaigning. You have to drill. What does drilling look like for Reform UK? It means building our branches. It means appointing officers. It means identifying candidates and activists. It means having branch meetings. In campaigning terms, it means delivering leaflets, knocking on doors, and holding street stalls. Let me say it again, you have to drill. To drill means spreading the word to those that voted for another party or didn't vote at all. It means to take on casework, to listen to voters, to understand their concerns and make them feel heard. To drill means to campaign on our national message, but also to identify local issues, take those up and show residents you're on their side. In November, Donald Trump caused a political earthquake that should inspire us all. Against the political and business establishment, against the mainstream media, against the celebrity class, against the weaponized justice system, and against the pundits and the pollsters, he showed what can be achieved when real leadership stands up for ordinary people. And that is the scale of the opportunity we now have to reshape British politics. But it's also the scale of the challenge. So here, in the South East, we have a fantastic team that needs your help. From Winchester to Woking, from Banbury to Bognor Regis, from Leatherhead to Lewis, every leaflet matters, every door knock matters. And come 2029, every vote and every constituency will matter. And then, together, we can change politics for good. Thank you. Next up, it gives me enormous pleasure to introduce one of our star candidates from the general election. A couple of years ago, Myron joined Reform UK after hearing about our common sense approach to tackling the key problems facing our country and how we want to recreate an economy and society where hard work and determination are rewarded. Since then, he's stood twice for council and, of course, in the general election for Epsom and Ewell. Away from politics, Myron has huge experience working in the NHS through his background in dentistry, but above all, he's a passionate patriot who wants to serve our country. Ladies and gentlemen, Myron Senthil-Nathan.
Ladies and gentlemen, so I broadly think there are two ways in which you can live life. You can either keep your head down and have a comfortable living, or you can put your head above the parapet because you realize that life is about living a higher purpose. It's about sacrificing, committing to a higher purpose. I believe Nigel Farage, when he came out of the good life of semi-retirement and took on the burden of leading reform, the challenge, the abuse of leading reform, I believe he did that for a higher purpose. I believe Richard Tice, who valiantly kept the party going for years and then humbly stepped down as soon as Nigel came back, I believe he did that for a higher purpose. And I believe the candidates who have also put their head above the parapet and stood for reform believe in a higher purpose. I believe the branch managers, the members, those who are handing out leaflets, all of us believe in a higher purpose. And I think fundamentally, from the grassroots to the HQ, reform stands for a higher purpose. It stands for something more than ourselves. It stands to resurrect the glory of this country. Because for too long, for decades, we have suffered from a democratic deficit. Tony Blair's constitutional reforms. Nobody really voted for net zero. Nobody voted for mass immigration. Nobody voted for the lockdowns. And recently, Surrey County Council have also postponed our May elections, seemingly. It looks like it. You know, I've often been saying Britain is exiting the first world and entering into a banana republic situation. And the councillor, Tim Oliver, he's quoted as saying that he owes the Surrey residents the best deal possible for devolution. But I say to him, he owes the Surrey residents a democratic vote. Democracy delayed is democracy denied. The thing to understand is this. It's an unpopular opinion, but I think the Labour Party, the Labour government, is a necessary catastrophe to show once and for all that the establishment parties cannot offer any solutions. They are the final nail in the coffin. The Conservative Party have proved themselves as the party of managed decline. The Labour Party have proved themselves as the party of active decline. And there's no escaping this decline. If you're not far from here in Frimley, a hotel turned into a migrant hotel. Young, undocumented men thrust upon a community. Even a few months ago, my own house got burgled. Around 48 hours later, a police officer arrives, looks around, gives me some words of sympathy, gives me a little registration number, and then goes home. He knows he's not going to catch the criminal. I know he's not going to catch the criminal. The criminals know they're not going to be caught. That is British life today in 2025. People are starting to join the dots that the Uni Party is finished. You know, yes, I agree, 100%. 100%. We've become a dictatorship. You know, Patrick O'Flynn tweeted the other day, he said, every week since July has been the worst week for the Labour Party. Right? And it feels like that. They're bundling on from one disaster to another. Do you know why? Because there's fundamentally a hardware problem with the Labour Party. You can't just tweak their policies. There's a hardware problem. They are a socialist authoritarian government that worships the public sector. They're never going to find any solutions to this country. And the Conservative Party are two souls tragedy, right? That's why under stress, they'll never make any right decisions. They'll always break apart. Kemi Badenoch says we're going to work out our first principles. Let me translate that for you. That means we don't know who we are, we don't know what we stand for, and we don't know what we're going to do. All of us here at Reform, we know why we're here. The DNA of Reform stands for the British citizen first, the global citizen second. It stands for a love, a sense of gratitude, a sense of belonging for this land and our inherited history. It stands for strong borders. It stands for slashing net zero subsidies so we can free up cheap energy, so we can have a low tax, high growth economy, and we can obliterate identity politics once and for all. The thing is that Reform, all of us here, we know who we are, and that's why we have clarity. And if you have clarity, you have strength. And that's what the country desperately needs, strength. And we've seen how this strength has been translated into action. Just look at what's happened with the 5 MPs that we've had in Parliament. When we had the Manchester Airport incident, we organised a private prosecutor. When the Labour Party shamelessly voted against a national inquiry, Nigel pledged that we would fund our own national inquiry to get justice for our girls and daughters. Look at Rupert Lowe. Rupert Lowe has been hammering the Department of Work and Pensions to get transparent data. Richard Tice relentlessly asking questions, trying to save our steel industry in Parliament. Zia Youssef working relentlessly to establish grassroots branches across the nation. We are a party of action, and that's what we should be proud of. But it's not just action, it's also language. Language is important. George Orwell said that bad actors always hide behind vague language. Does that remind you of anyone? Keir Starmer uses the word far right, he uses the word working people. He uses words like Islamophobia. He doesn't know what that means. We don't know what that means. No one knows what these words mean. These words are fig leaves to cover his incompetence and his corruption and his deviousness. When the front bench of the Labour Party are asked, what is a woman, the most fundamental question, they can't answer. But look, that isn't just a gotcha culture war question. If you can't answer what is a woman, it means either you're ideologically possessed, so you can't even see reality, or you're enslaved to people behind you who are ideologically possessed, and you're too cowardly to call out reality. Right? That is the problem with the Labour Party. They always put ideology first, pragmatism second. That is why whatever they touch fails, whether it's the economy. Just ask Rachel, she's in China. Our Rachel, who identifies as an economist, that one, yeah. Ask her. The economy, energy, justice, education, it all falls apart because they always put ideology first, pragmatism second. And that's why this country is being driven off a cliff. Do you know what? The British public are just yearning for one thing, common sense. That's it. It's very simple. People label reform as radical, as populist, but the reality is reform is just sane. We are just sane. We have a sane vision for this country. We have sane policies for this country. It's very, very clear. But let me tell you, the general election is coming quicker than we think. My personal opinion is this. I don't believe Rachel Reeves is going to last very long. I don't think Keir Starmer, in my opinion, will last until the end of the year. It's my honest opinion. Right? But I tell you this general election is a special general election. It's a critical one. It is the last general election we have to save this country. Our economy has been battered. Our culture has been decimated. Britain is about to take its last gasp of air. This is critical. This is a democratic emergency. Jordan Peterson said very recently, he said, it's so sad to look over at the United Kingdom and see the mess that they've got themselves into. He said, I pray that you get your act together. It will be a shame to lose you, he said. Reform is here to make sure that does not happen. Understand, all of us, this is a once-in-a-century situation we're going to have in the next general election, and we're here to make history. Do not underestimate what you are doing when you're handing out leaflets, when you're campaigning. We are making history, make no mistake. This party, as I said, is beyond all of us. It's for a higher purpose. And let me tell you what that higher purpose is. It is to resurrect the soul of this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Myron. So now we move on to Kent, which is an area that is full of promise for Reform UK. In the general election, our next speaker, Thomas Mallon, won nearly a quarter of all the votes cast in Chatham and Aylesford, a constituency which has now become a three-way marginal. The latest polling projections, however, show Reform UK in a very strong position to gain it next time around, and that's what I know Thomas will be working very, very hard towards. But in November, however, Tom went one better, gaining our first ever seat on Kent County Council in a by-election on a massive swing. Now, I'm sure the prospect of replicating Tom's success across the county has absolutely nothing to do with Kent's request to cancel their elections. Ho, ho. Anyway, without further ado, let's bring him up. Tom Mallon, onto the stage, please.
Hello, conference. How are we? The
This is actually my first speaking at a conference this size, and there's so many people here. So I'm glad to see the room's full. It's absolutely fantastic. It's so great to be in a room this size with such like-minded people like myself. It's very rare these days, must I say. I never actually heard what Alex was saying, but let me introduce myself. I'm Thomas Mallon. I'm actually branch chair for Chatham and Aylesford, and I've just recently been elected as the first ever Kent County Councillor for Reform UK. You might have noticed there's a little bit of an accent thing going on here. So just to let you know, if you kind of tune into a little bit of a Billy Connolly or maybe a Kevin Bridges kind of accent, will be good. So just to let you know, I've been in Kent for 27 years. So I've actually been in Kent a lot longer than I've actually lived in Scotland. So this is actually my new adopted home, and I really do love the Garden of England. It is one of the most beautifulest counties you'd ever see. So I came down here as a builder. I worked in the building trade. I worked in places like Bluewater, Darren Valley Hospital, and I worked at Glaxo Wellcomes in Dartford. I don't know if many of you know that in Kent there. So I've always got in and about things. I've always been a grafter. I've always wanted to get in and do things. I've always had an interest in politics, you see. I studied politics at school, got an NVQ, and when I came out of building trade, I got into the warehousing game, and then decided about 2 years ago to join Reform UK, and here I am now. I'm standing right here in front of you lovely people. But I just want to say one thing. You see us people up here on the stage and you think these are the guys that drive this machine, this Reform UK machine. But I just want to say there's a whole back room of staff around there. People from headquarters, people that build this stage, people that are involved in logistics, organising memberships, organising things that people don't see. And I just want you to give them, please, a round of applause for all their hard work. But let's talk about volunteers, because there's a lot of people behind the scene that do volunteer their time, and there's a lot of volunteers for Reform UK, and that's how we tick. It's the volunteers that keep this organisation going. It's the volunteers that come out Saturdays, Sundays, evenings, weekends, putting leaflets through doors, telling people about the message that we've got to deliver. These are the people that make us tick. And can I just say, from a show of hands, how many people have done campaigning? Leaflets, anything like that? Even if you're on Facebook, sharing messages, anything like that? Now, you are the 100%, you are the real people that make this place tick. You are the people that make Reform UK work. Give yourselves a round of applause, honestly. So as I say, you guys are the real heroes. You're guys that volunteer your time to help people like myself, be spokespeople for my Chatham and Aylesford constituency, or even my Kent constituency as a councillor. It's you people that make that happen. So I thank you personally. Now, I was lucky enough, my campaign team that I worked with in Kent, in my opinion, they were the best campaign team in the whole of Kent that I could have got. We had Chris, we had Colin, we had the two Ryans, we had Benjamin, and we had an army of supporters, like a people's army that I can see sitting right here in front of me right now. And we were knocking on doors tirelessly, week in, week out, and we got the job done. And that's what it takes. It takes real dedication and real commitment. And that's how we're going to win the next general election, by dedication and commitment by people like you. Now, just to drop a little plug note there, there's actually 2 by-elections going on in Rochester right now. So if anyone here from Kent can help out in a Rochester by-election, there's a stand at the back, and surely someone will help you and you can come and help. So thank you again. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've actually noticed there's a buzz, there's an energy. When you go around high streets, you go around the town, there's a buzz. Even when you're knocking on doors, putting leaflets through doors, or even holding a street stall in the middle of a town centre. You'll have people coming up going, thank goodness you're here. Thank you so much. It's like, they're so grateful to see us. I mean, myself and my wife, we were out campaigning in Chatham, and we were putting leaflets through letterboxes, walking down gardens, putting the letters through the letter. There we go, in there. And then we walked away from a house, and someone's come running out, excuse me, waving the leaflet, and I'm going, looked at my wife, and she looked at me and thought, and she went, thank you so much. And that is the gratitude we get out there on the doorsteps now. It's absolutely fantastic. So, where are we? Yeah, so in Chatham and Aylesford, I don't know if Alex mentioned it, we got 24.5% of the vote in Chatham and Aylesford. We came third, but we're only 3,000 behind Labour, who won the seat. But I think, as Alex said, if we had the general election tomorrow, we would actually win Chatham and Aylesford. We would actually have 50 more seats. Now, to me, I say that is down to people power, it's down to Nigel, and it's down to Zaya for turning this organisation and heading it in the right direction, because we are moving in the right direction with branch structures all over the country now, and we're getting more professionalised, we're getting more media coverage, which is fantastic, and that's what we need, because if we want Nigel as PM, we need to go out and work hard for that, and that's what we're going to do. Right, so that election was about 6 months ago. A lot's happened since then. I know for a fact, my wife, she keeps an eye on the little counter for how many memberships we've got. Have you seen that? It's absolutely fantastic. She would check it on a daily basis with monotonous regularity just to see if we'd beat the Tories yet. And the day we beat the Tories, she was dancing about the house. God bless her. Yeah, but as I say, she keeps an eye now. There's an app out there that's called the Election Polling App, and it can tell what the polling would be and what would happen if a general election was called tomorrow and who would win that seat. So it's quite handy to look at, because a lot of Kent is turning turquoise, by the way. A lot of Kent is turning turquoise. And talking about the membership counter, we are still the fastest growing party in the UK, possibly even Europe. I don't know the facts on that, but I would say we would be. So we are still going strong. So some people might ask, what do Reform stand for? Well, that's quite easy, really, isn't it? Because we stand for family, community, and country, in that order. Family first, then the community. Being a Kent County Councillor now, you have to see the community spirit in people, and you have to keep those communities going, because what we're getting at this moment in time is a government that's trying to shut down pubs, it's trying to shut down community centres, and it's trying to take the community spirit away from towns and villages all over the southeast of England. And that is so they control us. That is just pure control, and we can't let that happen. We have to keep the pubs open. We have to keep the community centres open for the local residents, and we've got to keep pursuing the very fabric that keeps the communities together, and that's what we're going to do, and that's what I'm going to try and do for Kent County Council. So right now, at this moment in time, we've got an energy bill crisis. Energy bills keep going up and up and up. We've got failing GP systems, we've got failing schools, we've got a failing NHS, we've got a failing economy, we've got failing borders, and if you ask me, we've just had 20 years of failing governments. So what are we going to do about this, ladies and gentlemen? Right in front of me, I see the People's Army. I say we get out and tell as many people as possible about Reform UK. We are the only future this country has. If we want to save this country, ladies and gentlemen, we need to get Nigel Farage as Prime Minister in 4 years' time. That's the only way we're going to save this country. There is no other way about it. We need to get up, get out, start putting leaflets through people's doors, start getting organised. And ladies and gentlemen, and that's how we save this country. A better future for you, for me, for our kids and for our grandkids. We need Nigel as PM. Thank you very much.
very much, Tom. An inspiration to all of us about how we do grassroots campaigning, and that's how we get the results. And ultimately, as Tom said, that's how we'll get Nigel into Downing Street. We're going to have a short break now. If we can try and be back in our seats for about 7:20, and then more speeches to come, more excitement. But yeah, go and get yourself a drink or coffee or whatever, and see you back at 7:20. Thank you very much.